Hey there, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're setting the stage for a really fascinating exploration into how massive, deeply entrenched systems actually change over time. Because, whether we're talking about the fundamental laws of science, the underlying architecture of the internet, or even the incredibly complex, high-stakes world of global geopolitics, systems tend to follow a very specific, totally predictable life cycle of stability, crisis, and then ultimately revolution.
Okay, let's dive into this. On the surface, this feels like an impossible synthesis. I mean, seriously, what could a 1962 philosophy book about the history of science, a modern website's anti-bot defense system, and the 2026 US-Azerbaijan Energy Alliance possibly have in common? It kind of sounds like the setup to a really nerdy joke, right? But today, we are going to see how all three of these things perfectly demonstrate the exact same mechanics of system collapse and system renewal. So, to really wrap our heads around this, we have to start with the philosopher Thomas Kuhn. Back in 1962, he published this massive conceptual framework called the structure of scientific revolutions. And Kuhn popularized a word that you probably hear all the time today, paradigm. Now, a paradigm isn't just some loose theory. It's the core concepts, the accepted rules, and literally the map that directs how a system operates during a period of what he called normal operation. Basically, when everyone agrees on the rules of the game, you're operating safely inside a paradigm. Kuhn's big argument was that systems, they don't just progress in a straight, smooth, predictable line. They actually go through 5 distinct phases. You start out with this messy pre-paradigm phase, and eventually, things settle down into phase 2, normal science, where everyone is just happily solving puzzles under those agreed-upon rules. But then anomalies happen. Weird things occur that the current rules just cannot explain or handle. If those anomalies pile up enough, the system enters phase 3, a crisis. The old rules completely fail. And this triggers phase 4, the paradigm shift, an absolute full-blown revolution, where the underlying assumptions are totally torn down, which ultimately lands us in phase 5, the post-revolution, where a brand new paradigm is officially established. All right, let's look at our first micro case study from the digital world just to see this in action. For decades, the old paradigm of the internet was open web access. We're talking seamless resource availability for everyone, everywhere. But recently, a massive anomaly appeared on the scene. AI companies began aggressively scraping websites to train their massive models, and this triggered a total crisis. The sheer volume of that scraping was causing major server downtime, making websites completely inaccessible for everyday users. The open web paradigm literally began to break down under the weight of this huge new anomaly. So the crucial point here is how a system defends itself and ultimately changes the rules. Take an anti-bot system called Anubis, for example. When a server faces this intense scraping crisis, it deploys a stopgap measure. It identifies the automated scraping, and instead of just freely serving up the web page like it used to, it presents an Anubis challenge page. This forces the visitor's computer to execute a proof-of-work task, kind of similar to Hashcash. Now, for a normal user, that computing load is totally invisible. But for an AI company that is trying to scrape millions of pages, it makes the process incredibly expensive and painfully slow. The server protects itself by literally demanding a brand new rule, the execution of modern JavaScript, just to survive the crisis. The paradigm has completely shifted. Part 1. The geopolitical chessboard, when foreign policy faces a crisis. Now that we understand how anomalies force these systems to adapt, let's transition to our macro case study and apply Kuhn's entire framework to the deeply complex international relations of the South Caucasus. To really grasp the geopolitical stakes here, we first have to understand the dominant global energy paradigm that the US is actively navigating. And the scale is just staggering. The OPEC Plus alliance, which includes Russia, Kazakhstan, and Azerbaijan, controls 55% of global oil supplies. 55%! That is an unprecedented, almost unimaginable level of influence over the entire global economy. For the US, navigating this reality is literally the ultimate exercise in high-stakes normal science. The basic rules of the global economy are deeply, intrinsically tied to this one reality. But then an anomaly occurred. The massive geopolitical crisis triggered by the Russia-Ukraine war, which immediately and severely threatened Europe's energy security. And I want you to just take a look at this number, 11.8 billion. That is the cubic meters of natural gas that Azerbaijan exported to Europe in 2023 via the Southern Gas Corridor. During this unprecedented regional crisis, Azerbaijan stepped up to provide an absolute lifeline to Europe, suddenly making them a vitally important player in maintaining overall global stability. Now, what's really fascinating here is exactly why Azerbaijan became the essential puzzle piece for the West.
Breaking down the hard data for 2024, we're looking at crude oil exports at $14.6 billion and natural gas at $8.33 billion. This immense hydrocarbon wealth is the absolute cornerstone of Azerbaijan's foreign policy. For the U.S., whose strategic goal right now is to aggressively diversify European energy away from Russia and Iran, Azerbaijan isn't just some casual trading partner. It is an absolute necessity to prevent a complete collapse of the European energy paradigm. Part 2, Energy Trumps Democratic Ideology, the Clash of Values and Realpolitik. This is where we hit a really profound friction point in our story. The old U.S. foreign policy paradigm was largely based on the promotion of democratic ideology and human rights. But listen to how that old framework forcefully collides with the harsh realities of global energy needs when we look at the diplomatic language. In September 2023, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, speaking during the incredibly complex negotiations surrounding the Karabakh conflict, stated, "When it comes to sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence, we uphold those principles in the case of all parties concerned." This perfectly represents that traditional Western diplomatic approach, delicately trying to balance human rights concerns with regional stability. But then you have to contrast that with the perspective coming out of Baku. In April 2024, in direct response to European criticism regarding the suppression of independent media, President Ilham Aliyev offered an emphatic denial of the existence of censorship and persecution of journalists, specifically pointing to free access to the internet as proof that those claims were false. And this brilliantly illustrates another one of Thomas Kuhn's core concepts, incommensurability. Try saying that 5 times fast. Basically, Kuhn argued that sometimes paradigms are so vastly different that they literally cannot be compared. The participants are essentially speaking completely different languages, using totally different rules to determine what is true. Washington and Baku were experiencing pure incommensurability here. They were speaking completely different languages when it came to democratic values. Yet at the exact same time, because of the overarching crisis in global energy, they found themselves perfectly, seamlessly aligned on hydrocarbon exports. Part 3. A new regional paradigm, the 2026 strategic shift. This brings us to the final phase of Kuhn's cycle, the post-revolution. A crisis forced an anomaly. The old rules proved totally insufficient, and now a new geopolitical paradigm is officially established. Think about the massive 2025 TRIP connectivity project. TRIP stands for the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. This massive initiative focuses on restoring a 43-kilometer railway right through Armenia to connect the main part of Azerbaijan directly to its Nakhchivan exclave. Now make no mistake, this isn't just about moving trains. This is a paradigm-shifting infrastructure play. By physically creating this route, the U.S. and its allies are actively bypassing Russian and Chinese infrastructure, effectively creating a brand new transit hub between Central Asia and Europe. And that new reality? It was formally institutionalized in February 2026. The U.S. and Azerbaijan signed a charter on strategic partnership, cementing cooperation across 4 vital pillars: economy and trade, energy including civil nuclear power, digital development and AI, and security and defense. This charter firmly solidifies the paradigm shift. The U.S. has officially moved away from a paradigm of pure idealism and fully embraced this institutionalized realpolitik alliance based squarely on energy security and strategic transit. Which leaves us with a pretty profound question to wrap up our explainer today. We've seen how paradigms govern everything, from scientific theory to server architecture to global geopolitical alliances. So as we enter this newly established post-revolutionary paradigm of raw realpolitik in the South Caucasus, we really have to ask, how long will this new period of normal science actually last? What is going to be the next major anomaly, and how long before it triggers the next massive global crisis? It is such a fascinating cycle to watch unfold. Thank you so much for joining me, and keep questioning the paradigms around you.